What's up, guys? Vance Peterson here. I'm super excited. Today we're going to be bringing another church history snippet, and today we're going to be talking about Origen. Once again, for resources, Justo Gonzalez's book, I'll write it down below, as well as Roger E. Olson's book on church history. I'll put the titles below. Powerful books. Most of the information is going to be coming from those books, as well as a little bit from Britannica, just as another source to just double check all the information. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. So Origen is a very, 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 very controversial figure. And Roger E. Olson talks about that a lot in his book, that Origen's legacy is kind of controversial. It's some people yes, some people no to him. But basically, before I go there, I need to explain one thing. You had Clement of Alexandria and Tertullian. And Tertullian was in what was called the West. Clement of Alexandria was in the East. And here was the main difference between the two. Tertullian said you can't mix philosophy with the church. Clement said yes, you can. Clement and them believed, hey, the Plato, the God of Plato, this is the same God that we talk about. They tried to use theology to appeal to the Roman Empire. Philosophy, sorry. And personally, I'm on Tertullian's side. There is no business mixing church with culture. Culture should shift from the church, not the church from culture. Does that make sense? Anyways, let's get talking about Origen. So Origen was born in 185 in Alexandria, and Origen actually, according to Roger E. Olson, Origen actually castrated himself at a really early age, and we'll explain why this is important later. But basically, Origen was born to Christian parents. His dad was most likely a martyr, and Origen at a young age got invited to teach catechumens by Demetrius. And so he would be in charge of teaching catechumens, and Demetrius was the bishop of Alexandria at the time. And basically, catechumens were people for baptism. And baptism at the time, you didn't just get to be baptized. You had to at first go through the process of class, and then you could be baptized. Well, at 18, basically Origen ends up taking over this catechetical school, and he becomes really, really, really well known. Even the emperor's mom would come and want to be tutored by him. He was really strong with his philosophy, which it more or less could be really dangerous, and I'll explain to you why some of his doctrines were really dangerous. But basically, he would teach philosophy, Christianity, even so much so that one man named Ambrose was so impacted by him. Ambrose actually started helping fund him so that Origen could write a bunch of manuscripts and could write all these books and works of theology. And ultimately, Origen wanted to be ordained, but Demetrius refused. And Roger E. Olson talks about this, as well as Justo Gonzalez, that Roger E. Olson says that basically because Origen castrated himself, that was Demetrius's choice to not allow him to basically be ordained. But Justo Gonzalez and Roger E. Olson both say that it's most likely jealousy. Actually, jealousy was a big factor in it. So essentially, in 233, Origen goes to Caesarea, gets ordained bishop there, and continues his work. Well, one really famous work Origen wrote was called Against Celsus. And Celsus was a critic to Christianity, and this was a big work where he combated him and kind of held his ground. But in the midst of all his works, a lot of rough stuff came up too. And it's hit or miss, because you have what's called orthodoxy, which is widely accepted by the church, and unorthodox, which is basically heretical. Origen has affected some Orthodox teachers as well as unorthodox teachers. So you see his imprint has affected both sides. But one really dangerous teaching Origen had was called Appoc Catastasis. And Appoc Catastasis was basically this belief that all things would be reconciled to God. And it's even possible that he believed Satan would even be reconciled to God. And now we know this is Christian universalism, a heresy. There's only one way through Jesus Christ, and it's clear. Revelation talks about that Satan and his demons, as well as all those who are unsaved, will burn in the lake of fire. There's no biblical proof. So Origen wrote definitely some heresy there. And another thing Origen taught was that God can't have emotions because emotions basically are humanly. So anytime that God has anthropomorphisms or are related to humans or any of that nature, then basically you take it allegorically. You don't interpret it literally. So he would interpret so much of scripture allegorically. And one, Roger Olson really talks about this in depth, but it talks about the three types. He had corporeal, which was bodily, which meant literal. That was a literal interpretation for him. Soulish, which is rational and ethical and application for morality. That was to him stuff you can interpret for application to strengthen your soul, live more purely. But then this was the primary type he used, which was spiritual, and it had to do with salvation, and it meant ultimately leading to salvation. And he believed that essentially most of Scripture you had to seek out this hiddenness in Scripture that would ultimately help you lead to salvation. And Roger E. Olson says, Origen emphasized salvation as a process of transformation into the image of God and eventually into partial participation in God's own nature called theosis or divinization. And basically, he believed that eventually you would partake in things of God because eventually your nature would become more like God's. And now we have sanctification, but which helps us become more close to the image of Christ, but ultimately, like, we'll never become God. We can't become God. That's false. And then the last thing was basically Decius took over, and now Decius's goal was no longer to kill Christians, but rather to torture them until they denied Jesus. Because obviously when the Christians were being martyred, the church was inspired. So Origen was one of these people who he tried to torture, and actually Origen stood firm. Origen never denied his faith, and he was tortured for a long period of time, and then after he was freed, he ended up dying shortly in 254 in Caesarea. So that's kind of a breakdown of Origen. His legacy is kind of mixed. It's kind of mixed. There's some powerful people who have gleaned from him, and there's some powerful people in a negative way who have gleaned from him. For example, Arius. And we'll definitely be doing a video on Arius sometime soon. So stay tuned for that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Go ahead, like, subscribe, and share it with others. God bless you guys.